Okay, continuing Dreams, Evolution, and Value Fulfillment by Jane Roberts, a Seth book, Volume 2. So, like I said in the last video, we have a lot of notes to go through, Seth excerpts and comments that are important that you guys hear, otherwise I wouldn't be reading them, and I'm not reading them all. But, so we're still in session 931 in chapter Master Events and Reality Overlays. Note number 13 in continuance, okay? This is from a private session held April 15th, 1981. Okay, so Seth states in this session, quote, Rupert found great comfort in the church as a young person, for if it created within its members the image of a sinful self, it also, of course, provided a steady stream of treatment, a series of rituals that gave the individual some sense of hope the sinful self could be redeemed, as in the framework of most of Christianity, through adherence to certain segments of Christian dogma. When Rupert left the church, the concept of the sinful self was still there, but the methods that earlier served to relieve its pressures were no longer effectively present. The concept was shifted over to the flawed self of scientific vintage. Science has no sacraments. Its only methods of dealing with such guilt involved standard psychoanalytic counseling, which itself deepens the dilemma, for counseling itself is based upon the idea that the inner self is a reservoir of savage impulses. Rupert's creative nature early began to perceive at least that man's existence contained other realities that were deeper. Some of this is difficult to separate. To leave the church, say, meant to carry still some of the old beliefs, but without the band-aids that earlier offered some protection. He began to search actually from childhood in a natural fashion towards some larger framework that would offer an explanation for reality, that bore at least some resemblance to the natural vision of his best poetry. I have said before that many creative people, highly gifted, have died young in one way or the other, because their gifts of creativity could find no clear room in which to grow. They became strangled by the beliefs of the cultural times. In that regard, Rupert's creativity kept struggling for its own growth and value fulfillment. His psychic recognition of initiation represented a remarkable breakthrough, meant to give him that additional psychic room that would ensure the continued expansion of the abilities of the natural self. The sinful self concept is a personal one for each who holds it, but it is also projected outward into the entire species, of course, until the whole world seems tainted. Rupert's creativity broke through to provide our sessions and to release the psychic abilities that had earlier been nearly, but not completely, repressed. His poetry acted in some regards as a stimulator. That breakthrough, you might say, with perhaps some exaggeration, was a lifesaver, for without some such expansion, Rupert would have felt unable to continue the particular brand of his existence. It is not possible to say in words what one person or another looks for in life, or what unique features best promote his or her growth and development. Even two plants of the same kind sometimes require completely different treatments. The sessions, then, opened the door in a particular kind of value fulfillment that was natural to Rupert's being. Now, to some extent, it was that poor, unhappy, sinful self, a psychological structure formed by beliefs and feelings that was also seeking its own redemption, since even it had outgrown the framework that so defined it. I have said that in almost every case of severe dissatisfaction or illness, the underlying reasons will not so much be found in the discovery or expression of buried hate or aggression, though these may be present, but in the search for expression of value fulfillment that is for one reason or another being denied. Rupert broke through both psychically and creatively. That is, the sessions almost immediately provided him with new creative inspiration and expression, and with the expansions needed psychologically that would help fulfill his promise as a writer and as a mature personality. He was still left, however, with the beliefs in the sinful self, and carried within him many deep fears that told him that self-expression itself and spontaneity were highly dangerous. In that regard, you have what amounts to a creative dilemma. It is one thing to say that the dilemma is unfortunate, but it is also true to say that the dilemma existed because of a breakthrough that gave him what amounted to a new life at the time. End quote by Seth. Continuing with Rob's notes, he adds, "Next, and certainly because of my concern for Jane, I recalled a session she'd given for Chapter 7 of Dreams. Checking, I found that it's the 911th, April 1980, which means, incredibly, that Seth gave it almost 15 months ago. Mainly, he discussed one's choice of genetic defects before birth, but to me, portions of his material are very reminiscent of Jane's situation." Okay, so Seth states from that session 15 months ago, "While I admit that many people will not agree with me, I know from experience that most individuals do not choose one happy life after another, always ensconced in a capable body, endowed by nature or heritage with all of the gifts most people seem to think they desire. Each person seeks value fulfillment, and that means that all of their abilities and capacities can be best developed, and in such a way that their world is also enriched. Some people will choose defective bodies purposely in order to focus more intensely in other areas. They want a different kind of focus. Such a choice demands an intensification. It is made on the part of the individual and on the parts of the parents as well." End quote by Seth. Okay, and moving on to note 15. I'm only reading a small part. It says, this is Rob, "Seth doesn't come from some separate, more exalted portion of Jane's psyche that's off limits to her when she's writing her own books. As he's often said himself, he isn't omnipotent. Like Jane, he shrinks from being a guru, and I stress that Seth doesn't hold that attitude just because Jane does. Neither seeks to dominate the other. Each tries to help the other." That was in response to how Seth books sell more than Jane's books at the time. Okay, so right here, note 16, Rob says, "We held that one session on the evening of June 18th at the end of Jane's second day of recording her own sinful self material." Quote from Seth, "The main issues which the sinful self was concerned were focused more clearly in Mass Events and God of Jane. Since more than the other books, they represent a direct confrontation attacking the very legitimacy of the entire concept of sin and evil, insisting more dramatically on the good intent of man's basic impulses. Rupert's sinful self explanation represents a fascinating psychological document in that regard, and also shows the self's mobility and willingness to learn and change, once the intent is made to take a stand. It might be of value to have Rupert mentally ask the sinful self for a few comments on how its beliefs about the female sex were connected with its concepts of sin, and if those attitudes are changing. End quote by Seth. And note 18 with Seth excerpts. Rob notes, earlier in the opening notes for the session, I referred to the poor relationship between Jane and her mother Marie. Seth says, quote, I now want to put the sinful self material in a larger spectrum. Ideally, infants bond with their parents, particularly with the mother, but with the father also, and they bond with the general ideas of their society. This offers the sense of safety in which the youngster can then feel free and curious enough to explore its world and the nature of reality. You are social creatures. You fear abandonment for that reason, since you are meant to develop individually while also interacting with others. That interaction giving you the peculiar quality of established civilizations. Now Rupert had only one parent available most of the time, and he did not feel secure in that relationship, a situation chosen ahead of time now. There is great leeway in the nature of such bondings. With some people, they are so secure that they provide an overall, fairly permanent inner and outer framework. Rupert's relationship with his mother left much to be desired. The bonding did not secure him that vital sense of safety, and he felt threatened by abandonment. His bonding to the cultural beliefs of religion was very strong to make up for the initial lack. The sinful self material represents those ideas that were a strong element in his original belief structures. The troublesome material remained relatively inactive until the curiosity and ability led him to actively challenge those ideas, while he was also in a situation where the natural fear of abandonment might be suggested. At certain points, the assimilation of new information is so qualifiedly different from the original belief structure that in order to assimilate it, the personality is left for a time between belief systems. The point at which such a situation happens is, of course, internal, and it may or may not have anything to do with the quality of material, but with its nature. Each society, or each system of knowledge for that matter, has its own taboos built in, and most of these imply abandonment by the community. A firm bonding with a parent ideally implies, however, that the child will not be abandoned, despite parental anger at any given time. Now, remember that Rupert's mother used phrases like, I hereby disown you, and you are hereby disinherited, and I consider you no longer my daughter. Such situations increased Rupert's sense of not being safe, yet also reinforced feelings of independence, for he did not have to feel as dependent upon Marie as he might otherwise. The time would come, however, when the old bondings had to be encountered, for they simply could not hold the newer, larger frameworks of understanding. The ideas of the so-called sinful self represent several layers of activity then, troublesome aspects of belief structures that are shared by millions in your society and by certain levels of Rupert's personality. He is now trying to assimilate a greater framework, to become bonded to a higher sequence of knowledge. Once those old beliefs are understood, They will no longer be considered shameful in themselves, nor humiliating, or as attitudes to be accused of. His idea of a project on the magical approach now is excellent, for it suggests a new concentration or focus. End quote by Seth. Alright, so this is note 9, and it is Jane's journaling again, and it has to do with her previous reincarnational type dream experience. And Jane says, quote, Wednesday, July 15th, 1981. Last night, or rather this morning, I had a strange dream experience. Very vivid while happening. Quite important, I felt, and now I hardly remember it. The affair involved an excellent TV movie on reincarnation we saw last night. In the dream experience, I think I was considering doing a book, a sequel to the movie, but I was also seeing one or maybe two reincarnational lives of mine, seeing how a belief in reincarnation helped open a sense of the future in the present. I was learning how to visit those lives, which were still happening, and for which I think I yearned, without dying in this life. There was a road and other scenes from my past I wanted to paint, too. A significant green bottle. People I dearly loved, and Rob might have been involved, too. Lots I've completely forgotten about people who loved you in particular lives, always in some way being supportive, that were caught up in time-to-time overlays Seth has referred to in his late book Dictation. That rhythmic time overlays happened as various anniversaries or significant events from various lives overlapped, bringing them momentarily closer, like comets, when entries back and forth and interchanges are particularly easier. Part of my physical hassles come from fear of the unknown. Once I realized I was gifted in that direction, that certain friends we've made here represent loved relationships of reincarnational origin that offer support now if I accept it. How a belief in reincarnation and immortality added support to life so that it didn't seem dead-ended, that I could relax now, admitting and realizing that I did have certain fears per the Sinful Self's document, instead of pretending that I didn't. Because brought into the light, I really could handle them and see how they originated. Stuff on how society operated, whether it knew it or not, on a reincarnational basis, and how association was many lives thick, so to speak. Only these are thoughts I'm left with, connected to the experience while I've forgotten the events themselves, and the scenes that were extremely colorful and emotionally charged. End quote by Jane. Okay, last note, number 22. Okay, so it says, Rob notes, although Jane had, quote, particular difficulty, end quote, with a theory of reincarnation, both through Seth and in her poetry, she's always kept psychic windows open through which she can view and express reincarnational ideas and emotions. Poetically, this will be obvious when the book, If We Live Again, is published late this year. In her poetry, the young Jane was using ideas akin to reincarnation before she even knew the word, subject matter that was strongly disapproved of by the Catholic priests who visited Jane and her bedridden mother at home. Rob continues, I've noted before that Seth himself has no reservations at all about expressing reincarnational material. Listening to some of the tapes students made in Jane's ESP class in the early 70s, say, I hear Seth being allowed to spontaneously give regular students and first-time visitors often quite detailed and penetrating insights into their other lives, explaining how events and emotions from other experiences can intermix with their counterparts in present lives. Jane still picks up such information from others, but now she seldom expresses it through Seth. I think her deep concern about leading others astray, related as it is to her early religious training, is the inhibiting force here. Rob adds in note 9 and 19 for this session, their contents show that she hasn't closed a certain window into the dream state either. End of session 931. Yay. Okay. So I will get to the next video as soon as I can, going back into master events and reality overlays. Thank you for watching.